Welcome to your Time Management Revolution. This is Time Management Fixer Helene Segura. In today's episode, I'll be sharing a previously recorded interview during which we're discussing time management and mind management. Enjoy!
If you could change anything about your life, what would it be? Would you get a better job, be in better shape, have more time for friends and family? Doing what works can help. We talk with experts on everything from managing your money to getting over a scrap with your sweetheart. We're your guide to a better life. Now, here's your host for Doing What Works, Maureen Anderson.
The best piece of advice I've ever heard came from Dilbert creator Scott Adams. Be useful. Isn't that a beauty? And while Daryl Anderson, my husband and producer, and I want to entertain you with Doing What Works, mostly we want to help you. We want to be useful. And that's why we're always so eager to welcome back to the show Helene Segura. She's a time management expert, a phrase I don't level lightly. I used to be the person who thought she could manage your time better by clicking on fewer articles about that. But Helene changed everything. She made me realize I have much more to learn. Helene makes bold promises, and she keeps them, like the description of her book, The Inefficiency Assassin. And isn't that a title? Helene says, it's here, the book that will solve every time management issue known to man and woman. And now it's time to make better use of this time and welcome you back to the show, Helene.
Thank you so much, Maureen. That's probably the best introduction I've ever heard. You are hired for my PR team.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I'm just naive enough to believe what you said. Daryl, why are you smiling?
I'm so glad we've been able to find you a new job, Maureen.
Yeah.
Because you suck at this one. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, no,
I'm just
Daryl,
teasing.
be nice.
She knows I'm teasing. You do know, right?
I do. But I'm trying, you know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to figure out if Helene was serious. That's how needy I am.
Oh, of
Oh,
course.
no, I'm very serious. So let me feed your need right now. I'm totally serious. Thank you. Because, that's not something that's in my material that was said from your heart. So thank you.
Aw. Well, we're going to get along just fine.
Of course. I love talking to you guys.
We'd initially talked about discussing couples needing to communicate about time, whether they work together or not. And,
Right.
That includes business partners or colleagues who work closely together on a project or whatever. But more and more couples are starting to work together. I think of a guy we're going to have on the show again soon, another regular, Alex Lickerman, the doctor, and I think he and his wife, Rhea's this amazing commercial real estate salesperson, but I think they started working together. So I just think, Helene, this program is going to apply to a lot of people. You're working closely with someone, spouse or not, and your time management styles clash.
Mm-hmm.
Then what?
Well, this is where communication is so key because first you need to have communication with yourself and understand what your time management style is. And if your spouse doesn't know what his or her style is, you want to help them figure that out. And then once you two realize how you tick and how you operate, you need to sit down and decide, okay, if we have differing styles, then how are we going to handle this? Basically, you're coming up with a compromise. And so that way, both of you are feeding your styles and you're acknowledging your styles and then also working to the best of both abilities.
Am I the only person who hears the word compromise and her heart sinks?
Oh, because you won't get your way 100% of the time.
Of course. I'm that flawed that it matters. No, I think of marriage, for example, as management by committee. And that's not fun.
But it can be. And if you don't like the word committee or if you don't like the word compromise, then we can find a word that you do like, partnership. Partnership is a great word. No, I'm serious, because sometimes with the vocabulary that we use, if it has any kind of negative connotation in our brains, then we tend to not want to do whatever that word is. So if you don't like the word compromise, and if you don't like the phrase, operating by committee, then we can find that different word. So if it's partnership, if it's teamwork, something that is more positive to your brain but still describes what needs to happen.
Team. We love the word team, because when we're clicking, Daryl and I will look at each other and say team, and it never has a bad. I mean, how do you read anything bad into team, really? There's no bad in team.
Okay, so there's no bad in team, which means we can use the word team for you. And to be a successful team, we need to look at what your strengths are, what Daryl's strengths are, and see how we can utilize those strengths to the full advantage, so you guys can operate on all cylinders when you need to, and then you also have your downtime when you need to, because that will be a part of time management as well.
I think that's something a lot of people who work for themselves forget to factor in.
Mm-hmm.
Because
exactly.
there will always be more work to do, always.
Yes. And, that's something that we have to wrap our minds around. The day that we do not have more to do is the day that we're going to go out of business, because we no longer need to be utilized. So you want to have plenty of stuff to do left on your to-do list.
It doesn't mean you're hopelessly behind. It means you're alive.
Right, exactly. You're alive and your business is flourishing because you do have all of these other things to do. So part of the entrepreneurial brain is to realize that you do want to have those things on your to-do list. You don't need to panic, because you're in control. You're working on the priorities from those lists. And you do want to have a list left for you tomorrow, because that means you're not obsolete. And your brain needs that downtime. So you can shut down that brain for a couple of hours and just relax and allow your brain and body to recharge, so you will be ready to go full speed at that list the next day.
Well, that's how you sell someone who's obsessed with productivity, by telling that person that you're actually going to get more work done for being refreshed from the break.
Exactly. You get more done in less time because your brain is able to operate at 100% capacity, instead of letting both your mind and your body get run down, and then your productivity begins to lower because your brain is not operating at 100%.
As you're talking, Helene, I sense what you prepared me for in our correspondence about the show. You just have a very counselor-sounding feel to you, and you told me that it often turns into couples therapy when you're advising people on these issues.
Right. And I do have to be careful and put the disclaimer out there that I am not a therapist. I don't have the medical degree, but that's what my clients will often say, wow, this feels like therapy, because we're trying to get down to the nitty-gritty. We're trying to find the source of the challenges, because if you can figure out the why, then you can figure out the how. And especially with couples, a lot of couples will not take the time to sit down and say, how can we best communicate? How can we best talk about time? That's not usually happening on weekends or over a glass of wine, because you have so many other things to talk about. But if you can figure out how to best communicate, then not just the time management parts of your life, but the rest of the parts of your life will go so much more smoothly, because you understand how to talk to each other and get your points across without hurting anybody's feelings.
So a principle of time management is at play here, but in a meta sense. I've heard that it's important to not only figure out what you want to do, but when you want to do it, because if it isn't on the calendar, it won't get done, and that includes talking about what's going on the calendar.
Exactly. It's so important that you have not just a daily meeting with yourself, but you have at least a weekly meeting with anybody who's an important part of your life. So if we're talking about your spouse, then you should be having a sit down with your spouse at least once a week to say, what does your schedule look like? Are you going to be having any oddities in your schedule this week that I need to know about if you're going to work late on one day or you're going to be out of town? What's happening? And that way you guys are keeping up with each other, so that way there's no bitterness about, oh, well, you didn't tell me you were going to be gone. How am I supposed to know what's going on with your life? Now, some couples, they do share a digital calendar, and they can check each other's calendars. But if that's not the case, like for my husband and me, my husband is not digital. So he is not going to check a digital calendar to see where I am. So we have both the weekly meeting where we're saying to each other, this is what's happening for the week, but we also just very quickly in the evening say, okay, now what do you have going on again tomorrow? Just refresh my memory. So that way we know where we're going to be, who's going to cook dinner, who's going to do which errand, and things just flow. Because that cuts back on all the little arguments that happen when you think somebody is going to do something and they don't. It just cuts all that back. It's so much more peaceful.
What's the biggest breakthrough you had with your husband as it relates to time management?
I would say that we realized that we had to tell each other what was going on after two particular incidents on a Saturday. I was trying to get some writing done in the morning in my office, and my husband kept coming in to ask, now, what detergent did you say you wanted me to use? And then later on, okay, I put the stuff in the dishwasher, so I have it running. Can you listen for the beep, please? And then a little while later, it's just one question after another, and he kept interrupting me. Even though he was trying to help around the house, he kept interrupting me so much that I got nothing done. Then in the afternoon, when I had given up on writing, he had started grading his papers. He's an English teacher, so he had 100-something essays to grade. Well, then I kept coming in to ask him questions, and I wasn't doing it as payback. It's just I had moved on to something else, and kept coming in and interrupting him. So that Saturday, neither of us got anything done. And we accidentally sabotaged each other. It was not intentional. It was not done out of malice. It was done because we hadn't told each other what kind of work time we needed, what kind of space we needed, so we wound up bothering each other. After that point, we realized, wow, this is what happened. That's when we started telling each other each week, and then also reminders each day, this is the time that I'll need, so that way we don't bother each other, we get more done, and we have a lot more free time because of it.
Love that story. More like that coming up on Doing What Works. Back with Doing What Works. Maybe you've heard this. How long a minute is depends on which side of the bathroom door you're on. I think how problematic an interruption is depends on who's doing the interruption. Are you on the receiving end of that, or are you making the interruption, Daryl?
What? What do you want me to say?
I want you to say how great I am for cleaning up my act when you told me early on, when I first started working from home, Katie was 3. And you know how much concentrated work a mother gets done with a 3-year-old tearing around, right?
I do.
I'd come into the office for 20 minutes, I thought, of concentrated time because she was watching some cartoon. And that was your chance to ask me these questions that
I needed to ask you.
Yeah, and I wanted you to ask me.
Sure.
But at first, I'd this is my time
to work. There was much letting of blood, I think.
Yeah.
Is a good way to put it.
But I cleaned up my act.
You did.
To this
your
day.
Credit, you are much better about interruptions now.
And the person I most wanted to hear that story is my guest today, Helene Segura. She's a time management consultant. Her book is The Inefficiency Assassin. Helene, I think that a lot of life is just imagining what it would be like to be the person listening to you talk and then adjusting before you talk. In other words, if you want to have a successful life, you ask yourself before you say something, how would I feel if I was the one listening to what I was about to say?
I wish I could have that filter turned on 24 hours a day. That doesn't always happen.
No.
And that's why, sometimes I stick my foot in my mouth. But yes, that's such an important part of communicating with your spouse or with your business partner, is thinking about how they would like to not only receive the information as far as tone, but the words that you use and the requests that you make. And each person is different, so you have to think about, okay, how am I going to approach this person? I know when a lot of people talk to their spouses, because there's such a comfort level there, they feel like they can just use any kind of tone, but if it comes out the wrong way, that spouse might get a little ticked off. So you're exactly right. We need to think about and adjust how we need to say things to this person who's in front of us.
The guy I mentioned earlier on the show, Alex Lickerman, the doctor who's going to be on again soon, I'm not talking smack about him because he wrote a blog post about this and published it. But he said he didn't realize how harshly he talked to his wife till he accidentally saw a videotape of them. They were putting up a Christmas tree and saving the video for their family archives or something. And he thought, geez, I really talked to her harshly. He had no idea.
Yeah, because I think we just tune out that filter when we get home from work, or if you're working in your home office all day, once you close down for the day, you just go into this comfort mode and you forget about all those filters. And that's a lot of times when we tend to snap and we don't even realize we're snapping at our spouse. So I would catch myself being short with my husband, something I would never do to a client, never do to anybody out in public, yet I would do that to the person who I'm supposed to love. So I might say, hey, ding dong, what kind of moron would do it that way? How rude. But, I'm letting out my frustrations from the day on him, and he had nothing to do with those frustrations. And because I feel like I have this comfort level with him and I can say whatever I want, then it should be okay to talk that way, but it's not. And so, that was part of learning how to communicate. Just because I have this comfort level with him doesn't mean I should speak that way to him. So, yeah, we moved to a whole new realm. So I totally get what Dr. Lickerman was saying, because a lot of times, if you're not fully present, you're not paying attention to how you're saying things, you don't realize how you're treating those who are closest to you.
I'm distracted because I'm trying to figure out if you really called him ding dong or something worse.
Oh, it was something worse. But since this is radio, I don't want the FCC coming down on you.
Oh, bless you.
We thank you for your consideration.
No problem. I have that filter on, so I'm watching my mouth.
Isn't she great? Isn't she just
Makes
the
it
best?
easier to edit afterward, too. So.
But may I just say, she also sounds like she'd be fun to have drinks with afterward.
Now, yes, most definitely.
And as we go to break, I think it's a good exercise to do, and I do it occasionally, believe it or not. I'll just take snippets from our conversation at home, and I'll think to myself, okay, if this was being broadcast, what would it tell people about Daryl and me? And we pass. Most of the time, I'd be very proud to have anybody listening to what goes on in that house. And that's how I want you to feel about what goes on in your house or partnership. So stay tuned for more of Doing What Works. Thanks for sharing part of your week with us on Doing What Works. We are talking time management today, specifically how to mesh the time management styles of two people who work closely together. Of course, I'm using Daryl and me as an example with my guest, time management consultant Helene Segura, who's also, by the way, the author of The Inefficiency Assassin, and you can learn more at Helene. She spells her name with an E on the end. Of course, Helene Segura, Segura.com. HeleneSegura.com. Helene, I didn't really ever think of this till you started talking a few minutes ago, but there's something important about Daryl and me. There's a big difference between Daryl and me when it comes to work, and Daryl, I'll let you weigh in on if you agree. But I'm a sprinter and you're a marathoner. If you have a project, you sit your butt down in that chair and you just work till it's done. And I can't work like that. I have to, work for a spurt and then do dishes and then come back for another spurt. I can't do the marathon thing you do.
Hey.
Does that ring true to you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
It's not a problem because thankfully our work responsibilities are, you just have so much, for example, production to do after we finish recording these shows. You don't have a lot of choice there, which I feel bad about. But during the week, you do have more flexibility, and you still tend to get all your work done and then do all your relaxing. And I like to throw in a little relaxing during the workday.
It's a style thing.
It is a style thing. Helene, does this trip a lot of couples up?
It does if they don't realize that's their style. So you're already ahead of the game because you realize it's your style, and it sounds like you two have already discussed this and respect those different styles. Now, with other couples, they may not realize, oh, I am a sprinter and this is how I like to work, or I am a marathoner and this is how I like to work. And then because they don't recognize those styles, and they don't know how to share that with their partner or with their spouse, and that's where you can build up some tensions. And to throw a wrench into things, sometimes we don't always have the same work style. It might depend on the type of project. So on one day, you may be a marathoner because that's how you want to face this project, and the rest of the week you might be a sprinter. So it's important to, again, share with your spouse, this is the schedule I'm going to have today. Today I'm going to marathon it. I'm going to plow through. Please only interrupt me if the house is on fire because I really need to get through this. And if you're going to sprint that day, then same thing. Just let your spouse know, this is how I'd like to work on it. I would love to take a break around 10:30 today, and I'm going to go run out and do some errands. So just give your spouse a heads up on how you would like to approach that project for the day, so that way you don't get those interruptions and you don't annoy each other, and then that will prevent an argument.
A little notice on things. Oh, it's magic. Mm-hmm. It's magic.
Yeah.
Okay, another thing we should point out about sprinters and marathoners, though, I think, is that you can learn a lot, and if you incorporate a little bit of the opposite characteristic, it can be a good thing. Like, for example, with my marathoner husband, if I've just presented him with, a reheated coffee, that's a good time to show him some silly things I've discovered in my online travels, and we have a little break that way, which makes his day a little easier. It makes life a little more worth living. Conversely, I know that his style of getting, just powering through the work, you're never going to be remorseful that you got the work done when you had the time, because there are always things that come up that make you glad you kept your butt in the chair, Mm-hmm. So I think we can learn from each other that way.
Oh, most definitely. And, you brought up a good point. When you are coming in and bringing in the reheated coffee, you might even, as you're sitting on the desk, say, can I just have 2 minutes because I need to show you something, as long as that coffee interruption is happening. And by asking for, I hate to use the word permission, but basically that's what you're doing, asking for permission. The spouse, who might be a marathoner, may actually appreciate that interruption even more because you're not just doing it, you're asking if it's okay. So that also helps with communication.
It reminds me of the question, though. Somebody asked an attorney, can I ask you a question? The attorney said, yes, that'll be $50.
Yeah.
Some people are annoyed if you ask to interrupt because you've already interrupted. But those people can just go fly a kite, right?
Well, and it goes back to understanding that person's style.
Sure.
So my husband knows that I do get annoyed if I'm in the groove and I'm about to be interrupted, so he'll poke his head in and he said, can I ask you a quick question? It's important. I would rather him do that than just walk in and start asking the question, because he allows my brain to get focused on him. Because when he used to just pop in and interrupt me, I'm about to totally stereotype males, but I was basically like the guy with the remote control watching TV and just saying to his wife, not listening.
Yep.
That's how I would be at the beginning of the interruption, but by him asking me, can I ask you a question, my brain focuses on him and can concentrate on him, and he doesn't have to ask me 3 different times because I'm actually paying attention. So that goes back to understanding each other's styles and communicating with your spouse. How would you like this to be done? And I realize that some folks out there who are listening might be saying, are you serious? You're going to tell your spouse how you want to be interrupted? But it makes such a difference when you guys understand how you operate. Everything just goes so much more smoothly.
Well, that is such a great point. Although I want to say one thing about how your husband does it. When he adds the words, it's important, I think that's magic, because what he's done is reassured you that he remembered that you're trying to get something substantial accomplished. Mm-hmm. And I would just find it distracting if he didn't add those 2 words, wondering if he ever even paid attention to me to begin with.
Oh, right. And, that also goes back to we've discussed what's important and what isn't. So I know that if he says it's important, it really is. He has thought about it.
Yeah.
Because what's not important is the detergent. Please do not ask me about laundry detergent because that is not important. But, if something else has come up, like, his dad has asked something medical-wise, he's at the doctor's office, that's important. It needs to be taken care of right then and there. So because we've taken the time to define those things, then communication just flows so much more smoothly. And by the way, when you have these conversations with your spouse about your working styles and how you would like to be interrupted and when, it doesn't have to be in this really rigid, cold environment. This can be done over drinks on Friday evening. You can have a fun conversation about it. So you're still bonding, but you're also moving forward with this communication piece.
Well, sure, timing is everything. To finish up on what I wanted to tell you about people who go, oh, come on, you actually have to talk about how you want to be interrupted. This is what I would say to that. I think one benefit of aging is dispensing with the whether you should or shouldn't be the way you are. You just accept that this is the way you are, and then decide how best to deal.
Exactly. Right. I totally agree. When we talk about time management, we're not trying to change who a person is. What we're doing is trying to figure out who you are and how you can best operate as that person. So we want to take how your brain already is. We're not going to totally rewire your brain. We just need to figure out how is it wired so that way we can just operate more efficiently and communicate better with the way we are.
This show is so doing what works, in my opinion, and we'll be back with more in just a moment.
We have the best radio stations bringing you doing what works every week, like KGTK in Port Orchard, Washington. Who knew life advice could be so much fun? It's what we do every week here on Doing What Works.
I'm your host, Maureen Anderson. This is Doing What Works. I think a big part of doing what works is realizing what's working and lingering on that for a moment. And I remember many years ago, a guest listening to Daryl and me go back and forth on the show and just being amazed by how well we get along, realizing, we're not going to show all our flaws on the radio.
Yeah, it's all show. It's a show business, You turn the microphone off and the fangs and the talons come out. No.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kidding.
I know. But anyway, she inspired me, Elizabeth Fournier, by the way, inspired me to think about why Daryl and I work together so well. And if you want the manifesto on that, just Google, my husband and I work together 24/7 without even the occasional urge to kill each other. You'll get one result, and that'll be my HuffPost article on the subject. I mention it partly to reassure my guest today, productivity consultant Helene Segura, author of The Inefficiency Assassin, that except for one more observation, I'm going to try to let you have the rest of the floor in this hour of the show, Helene. But one reason I was excited to work from home with Daryl is that I've always thought of offices as interruption factories, and I've probably mentioned that sentiment to you, but I thought when Daryl and I started working together that I would be free of all that stupid, time-consuming, waste of time, small talk, only to find that I have so much fun talking with Daryl that we can burn up a lot of the day doing nothing but talk. And that's not good considering how much work we have to do. I mean, some of it's fine, but I didn't see that stumbling block coming is what I'm saying.
Ooh, that's very interesting. I personally feel, and I've observed this in offices, when everybody gets along, interruptions tend to happen more because people like each other. They do have that small talk. As opposed to working in a hostile environment where you don't like people, there are fewer interruptions in a hostile environment because nobody likes each other. So that's why if you really like your spouse, it can be a little dangerous, and that's part of the reason why you do have to set a few boundaries because, just like you and Daryl, my husband and I could, if we got off topic on something, we could talk about that for hours and then never get anything done. So that is one of the downsides to really liking the person who you're working with. You need to be careful and focus so that way you don't get too far off track. But you're right, it can very much turn into an interruption factory.
I'd like to institute a new policy.
What's that?
Since
this ought to be interesting.
Since you have so much fun talking to me and it contributes to the inefficiency in the office, I'm going to dial it back a little, okay? I'm not going to be as nice to you from now on.
I know you can do it.
Just so you know.
Yes. Daryl, how about tomorrow from 9 to 11 a.m. you be a total ogre? So that way Maureen will not want to speak to you and she can get some stuff done.
It's on.
Okay.
It's on.
Very good.
Helene, what else trips people up when they're working in close quarters?
I really think it's important to actually go back to a higher level and talk about goals. Because a lot of times we just see what's in front of us and the spouse only sees what you're working on in that moment. And if both of you have an understanding of what all these small pieces are going to lead up to, that can really help the spouse understand why you need this space in order to work, because you're trying to achieve this higher goal over here. And when both of you understand what that higher goal is, that keeps you motivated to work and keeps you motivated to keep those lines of communication open. So I think that's just really important.
It's a dance. You can't change a step in the dance without it throwing the whole thing off.
Right, unless your partner knows ahead of time what that change is going to be, and then you can modify that together. So it all goes back to that communication, making sure those lines of communication stay open.
Well, when we come back, given there are a few phrases that strike terror in the hearts of anyone, really, then we need to talk. I'm going to hit Helene up with a good way to introduce the fact that you need to talk. And that's ahead on Doing What Works.
Thanks for listening to Doing What Works and to our radio affiliate partners like KXYL in Brownwood, Texas.
You're listening to Doing What Works. If you grew up in a household with a lot of conflict, two things probably happened. One, you accepted a lot of conflict as normal, and that can be a bad thing because if you have sort of a sunny life now, you can think something's wrong and always be sabotaging it. But one benefit of growing up in a house with a lot of conflict is you accept that conflict is a part of life, and you're not necessarily as afraid of it as people who grew up with things supposedly perfect. I bring it up because at the office, I don't know how many people seek conflict out, but it is an important part of life. And of course, it's going to happen at the office. So what do you do? How do you introduce the subject to someone when you have to tell that someone something not good is going on and you'd like to work it out? And I thought a good person to ask would be my guest today, Helene Segura, author of The Inefficiency Assassin. Helene, is there anything less efficient than pretending conflict isn't there?
Oh, I can't think of any less efficient off the top of my head. But, as you were introducing this topic, I had a flashback to my teaching days when the principal would stop by the classroom and he or she would say, I need to talk to you. Can you see me during your conference period? And instantly this panic would go through me because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the principal only asked you to go to his or her office when you're in trouble, and my conference period is not for 6 hours, so I'm wondering what the problem is. And so for 6 hours, instead of concentrating fully on my students, I am concentrating on, oh my gosh, what have I done wrong? And so for me personally, because I am a worrywart, that would be a terrible way to introduce the fact that you need to talk to me about a conflict. And so this goes back to working styles. How do you think that person would like to find out that there is a conflict and you need to talk? Is it something that you leave them dangling with throughout the day because it doesn't really bother them? Or should you approach them right away and say, hey, this situation is going on. We really need to talk about it. When will it be best for you to have this conversation?
I hope it's okay to ask if you were in trouble.
That particular time, yes, I think I was.
Really? I can't imagine you being in trouble for anything.
Yes, it was an incident between two students in the room. We were told that we needed to do more collaborative learning. So during collaborative learning time, the kids were in these small groups, and I had my back to one of the groups. And in one of the groups, one of the boys smacked another boy, and so I turned around and said, come on, guys, don't act like that. So apparently the parent did not like that I said that. So I was called into the principal's office and asked to apologize to the parent, and I wouldn't because I said they shouldn't act like that, and I should be able to tell them that. So,
Good for you. Good for you.
That principal was not happy with me. So that is apparently what I did wrong.
Oh, my gosh. Well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, sure.
There are some people for whom no matter what words you use, they wouldn't be wanting to talk. Then what?
Well, first I would preface it with, if at all possible, start the conversation with something positive. So some kind of compliment. Hey, I really loved how you handled such and such situation, or I love that you paid attention to this particular detail on whatever task it was. So you start off with something positive. That way they're not put on guard right away. They're actually relaxed a little bit. And then you can bring up the fact that we need to talk. And if that person doesn't want to talk about it, then you have to be able to coax them into needing to talk about it. So you bring up what the negative things would be if that conversation doesn't happen. Say, I don't want this to drag out because I think it's going to be uncomfortable or bad for both of us. So can we go ahead and just have this conversation sooner rather than later? So bring up the benefits of having that conversation sooner as well as the negative consequences of having the conversation later, so you can talk that person into having this conversation that might be awkward or difficult.
I agree. Empathize with the pain and reassure the person that you're feeling it as well. Helene Segura, author of The Inefficiency Assassin. More information at helenesegura.com. Helene, it was a blast.
Thanks, Maureen. I always have fun with you and Daryl.
And we as well with you. Thank you all for listening to this edition of Doing What Works.
This broadcast is copyrighted by North Shore Productions. To learn more about the show, you're invited to visit MaureenAnderson.com. You can read Maureen's blog, listen to her podcast, or pass along suggestions for the program. I'm Cindy Weir. Thanks for listening, and tune in again next week for more great advice and inspiration on Doing What Works.